Arena Talks. Today we will talk about Lord of the Rings, and my guest today is Jeroen Bakker. As you maybe know, this is the second episode of The Lord of the Rings. In the first episode, my guest was Jordan van der Meer, and this podcast was called Arena Talks Fantasy and Sci-Fi. Since then, this podcast has been through some changes. The Lord of the Rings is a series of 3 epic fantasy adventures films directed by Peter Jackson and based on a novel written by J.R.R. Tolkien. And of course, I also talk about the books. Set in the fictional world of Middle-earth, the film and books follows the Hobbit, Frodo Baggins, as he and the Fellowship embarks on a quest to destroy the One Ring, to ensure the destruction of its maker, the Dark Lord Sauron. The Fellowship eventually splits up, and Frodo continues the quest with his loyal companions Sam and treacherous Gollum. Meanwhile, Aragorn, heir in exile to the throne of Gondor, along with Legolas, Gimli, Boromir, Merry, Pippin, and the wizard Gandalf, unite to save the free people of Middle-earth from the forces of Sauron and rally them in the War of the Rings to aid Frodo by distracting Sauron's attentions. I'm also gonna tell you guys about a little bit about my opinion about the new series of The Lord of the Rings on Amazon. Well, everyone, let me introduce you to Jeroen. Hello, Jeroen.
Hi.
How are you doing today?
Well, I'm fine, thank you. How are you today?
I am fine, and thank you for joining me. We're going to talk about Lord of the Rings, and so what is your connection with the Lord of the Rings and Tolkien?
Well, it started when I was a child. My parents got a box with various books from a couple of friends of theirs, and in them was the Dutch translation of the Lord of the Rings, known as In de Ban van de Ring, which had an intriguing picture by Cor Bloch on the front. It's the Prisma book for the ones who know it, and well, the picture intrigued me, so I pulled that out of the box and started reading, and that's how I got hooked on the Lord of the Rings.
Okay, nice. And did you read the books first, or did you see the movie first?
No, I read the book first. This was in the mid-90s, I think. And what I did actually was, when I got stuck with the books, I started viewing the Ralph Bakshi cartoon.
Okay.
So that's what helped me get through the first and the second book.
Okay.
And of course, the Bakshi movie is not complete, so through the rest I had to pull myself through.
Is there anything? What does it attract you that much about Lord of the Rings?
Well, in essence, it's the separation between good and evil, and you have the ones that are fighting for the good of the world, and those that try to make their evil land on the world and force it in their in their image, actually. And that is what appeals to me most in any kind of story. It's the good versus the evil. But what I loved about Lord of the Rings is that it has so much in-depth information. I hadn't heard about The Hobbit or The Silmarillion or any of the other books at the time, and I was fascinated by the lore, by how it connects with an ancient past. And that was what gave it shape to me.
Well, I remember when I first read The Lord of the Rings, it took me a little while to really get into the story. How was that for you?
Well, it took me a while too, especially the first few chapters. When I read it in Dutch, I was still at school, and my teacher, who teaches Dutch, said to me, "Well, perhaps it will help if you just skip the first 50 pages or so, and then when you get the pace, you can either return to it or read it when you're finished." So that's how I actually did it.
Okay, yeah. That was, by the way, not only for me for Lord of the Rings, but like for The Hobbit as well. It took me half the book to actually into, because it is so detailed.
Yes,
Tolkien,
it is relatively detailed, and especially with The Hobbit, it's first from a narrator's perspective, and then that perspective changes in the second half of the book, which makes it, at least for me, more accessible to read.
if you would advise a young person to read The Lord of the Rings, is there something you would tell them that they have to take a look on, or just like we both have that experience? Okay, it's take you will be taking you a little longer to get into the story because it is that much detailed. And in one way, I think that's good, because if you see when Peter Jackson made the movies, he could a lot of when something was wrong or something he didn't know to how go further on. He always get back to the books, and he could read in the books for, oh, that's how it looks like, oh, that's how it went.
Yes, indeed. But there is a difference between writing a book, I'm a writer myself, and making a movie, because you
Yeah.
can't do one-on-one making a movie out of a book. That simply doesn't work for the entertainment value or the experience of watching that movie, the dramatization. When you're reading the books, you actually have several choices. First off, you can watch the movies and then read the books, which will make it easier and will give you a few surprises if you read the books. The alternative is, as I said before, just skip the first 50 or so pages and start reading from there. And once the Hobbit start traveling, that's the point that you can actually draw yourself into the adventure. Um, or you can just uh, wade yourself through it, so to speak. So you can read the book from start to finish and accept that it will take a little longer to get into the story than you're used to perhaps with other stories. What really helped for me was to make notes. And I don't mean writing the book open, but I am terrible with names. So what I did was I made a list of all the names that I came across and wrote in a few lines who they were, so that even after I put the book away for a couple of days, I could still say, oh, that's this person and that's that person, and uh, pull myself back into the story. That really helped me.
So before we start this recording, you were talking about some kind of a Frisian translation of The Lord of the Rings, because let me tell you guys, Jeroen and I are both from the Netherlands, but I live in the UK right now. But so Frisian is like a different kind of language, Dutch language, and it's like, I don't want to say old language, but it is also, it's a traditional,
It's an
traditional,
ancient language, yes.
yeah. So talk about that.
Well, first of all, Frisia, or Friesland, is a part of the Netherlands. It's a province, actually, but used to be a kingdom with its own, within its own right, and have a Frisian culture and a language of its own. That language is linked to several languages, including English and the Scandinavian languages and some German. and I believe in Germany there is still a province called Ostfriesland. If I'm correct, I'm not entirely sure, but there should be something like that. And due to the link between English and Frisian, I started to wonder in the early years of the millennium about what would a Frisian translation be like from a talking perspective. I think personally he would have liked a Frisian translation. He actually mentions the Frisians in one of his other works, and so I started looking for people who would be able to translate such a work, and eventually found Onnetjek Opgema, who was already in the process of translating The Hobbit into Frisian. And we worked together, not on the translation, that is what he did himself, but I was kind of able to pull some strings to get the rights on the translation so it could actually be published.
That must be quite interesting to read in Frisian as well.
Yes, indeed. And well, my Frisian is not that good because the whip of the tongue, so to speak, is very different from Dutch or English. But if you'd like, I could give it a try and read the Ring poem in Frisian.
Be my guest. Go for it.
And I will have to get the book, just a second. I might also mention that there is also a translation of The Lord of the Rings in Frisian, translated by Uwe Westra, and he wrote the poem I'm about to, or translated the poem I'm about to read. If I can find it. In ring allegaar te hersker, in haar vinder, in ring die het haar in het juster viert in aller vinder. Draaieringen voor de elfenkenings in het jaar, dan voor de dwergenherren onder stien kroon, joggen voor Minskeben, boon on herda, in is voor de juster op zijn troon, vier in Mordor, landsdouw zonder dagera, in ring allegaar te heerser, in haar vinder, in ring die het haar in het juster viert, in alle binder, vier in Mordor, landsdouw zonder dagera.
Yeah, I recognized some words, but not all of it.
It's really hard, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. There is a Frisian saying that says, green cheese is good English and good Fries.
Yeah, so let me explain, guys. There is just a small percentage of Dutch people who actually speak Frisian, so, but it is a historical
language.
Yeah. That it has been translated to Frisian is special as well.
Yes, it is. And perhaps comparable to South African translation in comparison with language, because in South Africa the majority of the people speak English, but there are still those who speak the Dutch-related African language.
Yeah. I think as a writer, have you ever read a book and just as a writer instead of a fan or just a reader?
I think there is no difference for me when I read a book. And you simply read the book and then have your opinions about it. And some of those opinions are based on my personally reading the book and enjoying it, and some of my opinions are based on like, oh, that's a nice way to use language, or things like that. And I think majority of talking readers do mind the way, or do like the way language is used by talking, and how that affects the world he is describing.
Yeah, because we know, of course, Tolkien is one of the professors who also invented languages. And so tell me, how did you came interested in reading Tolkien, and what did it did to you?
That's a rather complicated question. Well, as I said before, I was first introduced to Tolkien as a secondary school going kid, and I wasn't a writer back then, although I did write some things, but I wasn't particularly interested in language at the time, so that was not an issue for me when I started reading it. It was just the way I think the text grabbed me, the display of images that Tolkien creates in your mind when you read it, but also the gaps he leaves, like you can fill in the blanks a bit. And I really enjoyed that because that gave me, well, I wouldn't say inspiration. That's a bit too much. That's like I would write something inspired by, but that's not true. It but kept me interested. Answers your question.
um, yeah, is there anything of Tolkien which you absolutely like? Is Lord of the Rings also your favorite book of Tolkien, or?
Well, it's the first. So the Lord of the Rings is the first, and it will always have a special place uh, because of that. But I'm actually very fond of the creation chapter in the Silmarillion. I'm a very great lover of music, all kinds of music, and the fact that he created his creation myth is based on music that was so, well, I'm going to say it again, inspiring to me, that really was the connection that I was waiting for when I first read that. I read that chapter 3 times before I moved on to the second.
Because what I always experience is that the Fellowship of the Ring part is just like going on a journey, happy-go-lucky, a lot of colors, and we also see that in the movies, of course. But if you are reading, for example, the part of the Two Towers and the Return of the King, it's very dark. Yeah, so it's a very, I don't want to say especially dark um, book, but I mean also like it's very heavy to read in a way. And of course,
Yeah,
you are in with the Fellowship of the Rings. It is totally, and that's what I mentioned. It took me a while to actually get into the story because it was so detailed, and your mind is working so hard to get all the details in your head and to imagine. And I think that's why a lot of people say, okay, I'm not going to read the books, it's too much for me, I will watch the movies.
yeah. When you watch the movies, you also get a lot of detail, especially in the Fellowship, that comes your way, and to process that is also, I think, the same experience, just without the reading, just watching it, like you're on the journey with them.
Mm,
And I think that also changes for the Two Towers and Return of the King, as you see the movies also take a grimmer tone,
yeah.
not only in storytelling but also in filters used. It's much more grim.
Yeah, and we just talked about um, filming a book is sometimes very hard because you can't put some of the things in movie. And we saw that with the Two Towers, and I remember because I have the extended editions of Lord of the Rings, and in one of the documentaries behind the scenes, they told that the Two Towers in the movie was different after the book because what was in the book, they couldn't make that on film. It wouldn't be sense to put that in the movie.
Yeah, because when you're reading the book, you first follow the hunters, and then you follow Sam and Frodo, and then when they eventually split up into multiple storylines, you follow them. But in a movie, you can't make those switches without annoying your watchers or your viewers. Sorry.
Although I must say they did it in a certain extent, and it was really nice to see that they followed those separate storylines. And I think I don't know what you think about it. Do you think that that Tolkien did it in a good way in the books, or was it a bad thing to have those separate storylines? Because I remember when I read it for the first time, sometimes that was very confusing because, of course, you knew who the characters are, but sometimes you're forgetting in a way of, okay, what is actually the storyline?
Yeah, I can understand that. But what I really experienced was I wanted to know about the story of Frodo and Sam. And when I read The Lord of the Rings, I really moved through the other chapters in a way that I could get to the parts where Frodo and Sam are on their journey. So it was kind of a vehicle to get me through the book and pace up my reading actually, instead of you know switching back and forth.
Yeah, what I really love about The Lord of the Rings is that the different kind of languages that he invented, and especially when there was one thing I really hoped that Peter Jackson would put in his movies, but he didn't do that, and that was about Tom Bombadil.
Yeah,
I loved that character, but it is I really pity that he didn't do anything with it.
I think that that goes for many readers of The Lord of the Rings. They'd love to see that character, but from the movie perspective, I can understand it because
Yeah,
you will slow down your progress so much so without adding to the character of Sam, Frodo, and the others.
I think in one way it's better to read the books first because you can read it with your own imagination how characters and places would be instead of watching them. And I had this experience when I watched the Harry Potter movies first and then read the books. When I read the books, I imagined that Daniel Radcliffe, for example, was Harry Potter. Do you think there is a big difference between the if you read it first or see the movies first?
Well, I only have the experience of reading first and then seeing the movies. But what I am autistic, so it's a little bit different for me than perhaps for some others. But I can separate my own images and the movies or artworks by others. So for me, it's not really a problem keeping the personal experience separated from what others create.
If there was a place in Lord of the Rings that you could visit, what a place would you like to visit?
Oh gosh.
And I asked this question to the first guest I had with Lord of the Rings. So yeah,
Yeah, I've had the question before, and I think what I really would like is that's more of my personal imagination. But let's say Middle Earth has a kind of library like Alexandria used to have. I'd like to visit such a library in Middle-earth.
Okay. Okay. Is there any characters you like in The Lord of the Rings?
Oh yeah, for sure. I like Sauron, especially because he was tempted to become evil. He was not inherently evil in the beginning. He became tempted by Morgoth, and um, I think that is something to relate to as human beings, that we are constantly under the temptation of doing things defined as evil, and that is something we will have to resist. And Sauron actually embraced the change. He went in the opposite direction of what I would like. Like Galadriel is actually the opposite of Sauron in that respect.
Hmm. Yeah.
What I like about personalities in Middle Earth and in Tolkien's Legendarium in general, that they have this personal experience in which they will either embrace their evil destiny or resist it and try to work for the good of all, actually. We talked about Tom Bombadil before, and the the reason he is in the book is, or well, perhaps that's my personal distillation of it, but it makes the hobbits grow from children to adults, so to speak. When they leave Tom Bombadil, they are adults, so to speak. And there isn't really a way you can put a scene like that into a movie the way it is done in the Tom Bombadil chapter. So I think the reason it was left out of the movie was not just simply it doesn't add to the characters in the movie itself, but that it would be very hard to portray a chapter like that and have believable characters arcs like over the whole of the movie. I think that is a, a, a point worth noting. But those who like to hear or see more about Tom Bombadil, it might be of interest for you to know that Welsh composer Paul Corfield Godfrey is working on the release of a future release, I might add, of a opera based on the chapter by Tom Bombadil.
Hmm. Okay, that's interesting. Never thought about Lord of the Rings and opera.
No, it may not be your first thought when you think of music and or drama, a dramatization of a work like that in opera. But yeah, there's going to be a cycle of the whole of the Lord of the Rings, and the Tom Bombadil will be included therein.
Yeah,
There
that's
already
nice.
is a portrayal of the Silmarillion in operas. There are actually 4 parts released of that, starting with Feanor, then going to Byrne and Luthien, then the Children of Húrin, and the Fall of Gondolin. And it will be sequeled by the War of Wrath relatively soon.
Okay, nice. So, is there anything you would like to tell us more about what Lord of the Rings for you means, or
Um, to me personally, it's a means of escapism. I've been bullied a lot in school, um, and it was always a nice way to escape into the realms of Tolkien, and that really also shaped part of my personality. I like to think that um, in the way I resist the bullies, you know. it's almost biblical in the sense like turn the other cheek.
Yeah, I think that is for a lot of people recognizable. And now you mentioned that, it reminds me also like Bastian in the Never-Ending Story.
Yeah.
And but I can relate to that too. I have my escape realms as well.
Mine
So,
includes the Wizard of Oz.
oh yeah, I love the Wizard of Oz. So yeah, we talked about a little bit of the villains, of course,
Yeah.
like Sauron. That's one of your favorite. Um, is the one of the, and I say, good guys species, or and of course, what you really like, or is
Uh,
it pure the
yes,
villain side?
there are so many, and that's probably why it's so difficult to pick one. But um, I think Sam could really be seen as a hero, and I think in the broader perspective of Middle Earth and the Tolkien's realm, Galadriel might be worth mentioning. I think I can relate to both in that sense. Not,
Do
of
you
course, in the grand scheme of things, but in the personalities more likely.
are the owls also one of your favorite species in this whole fantasy world and book in that way?
Yes, I think so, because apart from humans, which I assume we all are, elves actually are like a mirror. Something you might strive to be, but you know you will never be fully. And that is what intrigues me at them. You know, they have that grand desire to be at peace with the world, and that is something I think we humans in the real world should strive for too. With the war in Ukraine or famine in the other parts of the world, it's it's really hard to see, but it's even harder to notice that there is very little that you, on a personal level, you can do about it. And I think that's the experience of the elves. Now there is this world, many things happen, and there is just so much you can do.
If you could write a sequel after The Lord of the Rings, is there something you would like to write, and what is something you don't want to write in it?
I think I would dive into the new shadow that Tolkien wrote about. I think I would try and find all there is to know about what he did write about that, and then see if I can actually compile something that would make sense within Tolkien's writing. I think one of the things that I would absolutely avoid, but that would be hard, is elegy, LRB, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. You know, connections with biblical books and stuff like that.
So we know Sam is more or less the main character in the books and the movies, but um, what do you think of the fact that Tolkien wrote him as a hero and that he would say, okay, I will bring the ring to Mordor? Because, in fact, halflings were actually not really a species that is accomplished in that much, like, for example, an elf or a human or.
Yeah, I think the message there is that even something small can make a big difference. And I think that's referenced quite a lot before. But I think that really is the essence of the halfling or the hobbits in Lord of the Rings.
Yeah,
And
and
it's something
Galadriel
that,
said that too.
yeah, the great forces, the great powers, Sauron himself, Saruman, they all look down upon these hobbits and say, "Oh, they can't be of any interest to us." And then when the story evolves, they're actually their downfall.
Yeah, it is, because if you think of it, um, the men and the owls and the other species were in one way afraid of the ring and go to this mission, do this mission. But hobbits are small, they can go everywhere. They are in more or less the same height as, I don't want to say the big orcs, but the small orcs, what we see.
Mm-hmm.
So they can blend in, and I think it's very well done, and also how it's written, because you can actually really imagine how this whole mission is going to go. And I think if you haven't seen the movies and you just begin with the books, like I said, it's so detailed that you can imagine itself how it would be. And in one way, I think maybe Tolkien did that with a purpose, to write this in so much detail that you actually can imagine what he means.
Yeah, I can relate to that. Um, I think much of his desire for detail comes from his time spent in the war. And I think one of the things he might have picked up, I'm not sure, I wasn't there, is that, a little token like someone saying thank you or handing you a slice of bread could mean the world to you in that war. And I think that is um, what he tries to portray with all the details. Something small can make it real.
And didn't Tolkien wrote Lord of the Rings also because he could process what he has been through to the war as well?
Um,
That's what
I'm
I
not
heard,
too familiar with that, but I assume so, yes.
because that was one of in the documentaries, is that they said, well, the whole war thing, what you see the in the books and the movies, in his story, that was based on his experience of the war. Because I thought he went to two wars, right? First and second war, if I'm correct.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's true. Yeah.
So it's in one way, I think it was also like a therapy for him. Don't you think?
I don't really know that much about that, but I think the way Saruman is portrayed as building his Uruk-hai army, and that really represents the industrialization of war. I think that really
Hmm.
has that emphasis there.
Yeah.
The destruction of the forest, the almost alchemy-like uh, invention of the gunpowder and stuff like that. I think that really was important to how Tolkien perceives modern warfare.
I think in this case the hobbits are also uh, like hope for everyone else in Middle Earth.
Yes, I
And
assume they are. Yeah, so they don't know it themselves, and the others don't know it, except for those few that are concerned with the fellowship.
yeah, I think they're only uh, gonna know that when Aragorn tells them, "You little friends bow for no one."
Yeah.
And including in the book, but also in the movies, that was a powerful message.
Yes, it was, and I was actually surprised by how much that affected me watching the movies over and over again, and
Yeah.
that still is an emotional trigger for me. So that means it was very well done.
Yeah, it is, and you know, in one way, it gives me like a example too, and a hope too, because I'm small, very small. So, and that's just because of medical reasons, but also from I'm half Asian, so that's why I'm small. But every time I see that scene, for me, it's not only hope, but also some kind of a victory that I know, okay, you are small, but you are in this world and you have a mouth. Maybe they are watching, they look over you and whatever, but you are there. Use your abilities to make your point in what abilities you have. And I think that's the same for Sam and and Frodo and the hobbits.
Yeah, I think that is very much explained in the Council of Elrond when Frodo says, and I paraphrase, "You bigger all you want, I'll bring the ring to Mordor."
Yeah, and that was also a powerful scene when they were. I don't want to say fighting, but it was a war, and there were also, of course, the mankind was saying, or the humans were saying, let's use this against him, but the elves knew that's gonna be difficult because it's very influenced, and you have to so be, and that's the beautiful part of Frodo. Frodo was so strong to,
To resist the
yeah,
temptation.
yeah,
Resilient, I believe Gandalf calls it in the there in the scene in Council of Elrond.
yeah, and of course, that's one thing I really need to mention is the hobbits, Meriadoc and Pippin. Those were the comical reliefs.
In the movies, definitely yes.
If you,
In the books, I think they're um, not so much a comic relief as uh, a symbol of you know the common people.
mm,
So that they represent the common people, while Sam and Frodo represent the heroes who uh, stand out from the general crowd.
if you could meet one of the characters in real life, who would it be?
Oh gosh, who would
I
it be?
half probably thought you would say Sauron.
I think I might like to have a talk with Elrond, and I would like to
Ah,
ask him why he didn't throw Erendil into the fires of Mount Doom.
yeah, interesting. Well, I think we are at the end of the episode. Is there something you'd like to add?
Not really, except for one thing. We talked about the sway the ring has over the peoples in Middle Earth. One thing I like to note is that in the movies, the Peter Jackson trilogy, that the moment the ring drops into the snow and Boromir picks it up, that is really the moment for movie viewers, though the scene is not in the book, I think, that you actually see the temptation of the ring and what it does to people. Now, I
Yeah,
think that though it's non-canonical, it was really adding to the experience of the movie.
yeah, indeed. I think that's for a lot of, if you really, it's, that scene was really getting to you because you could feel the power of it, and of course you see it through the whole movie and books that what grip it has on people who are having it, and that's one of the reasons why Bilbo Baggins was that old. That's just because of the ring.
Yeah,
And I think in that scene with Boromir, I think that is one way to hate him for it, and in one way you could understand why.
yeah, He is the personification of human doubt.
And the only one who really resisted was Aragorn. And what I really, yeah, Aragorn is really, I really liked his character but he has a very difficult past.
Yes, he has a complicated past. Yeah.
But okay, well,
We'll hope to see more of that in the Amazon production.
well, Jeroen, thank you very much for joining me. Thank you very much for this interesting talk.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, well, maybe we can talk in another episode about another subject you like. And, well, thank you again.
Yeah, thank you.
Alright, guys. I must say that I have watched the Lord of the Rings series from Amazon. And I know that a lot of you guys don't like it. And I had heard a lot of negative things about it. But I must say, me as a fantasy lover, and if you can look through it as just another fantasy story, I liked it. But I think a lot of you guys have that, how must I say this? You all got that description of things that Tolkien wrote, and of course the typical fantasy tropes that anyone knows. I think you guys keep that a little bit too much in your mind. And I can understand where people are coming from. For example, exactly with the elves, that the elves have short hair. And that is not the typical trope we know and use for elves. But I must confess, the first time I saw that, it was a little weird. I had to get used to it, but I watched the series typically from a fantasy lover point of view and not of being, for example, a Tolkien fan or like me as a fantasy writer. It is more like I watched it with just go with the flow, and we will see what it brings us. And I must say, I really did like the storyline. I really did, because it shows you a little bit how it all started, and especially the finale of this season, and they shown everyone who actually is Sauron. I was shocked because I never thought that this person would be Sauron. And we see there is also a birth of one of the, I don't want to say first wizards, but because I also was thinking, okay, who is this wizard really? Is this for example, a ancestor of Gandalf? Well, I don't know. I didn't look it up really, and it's also like you learn a lot more of the hobbits. Of course, again, the evil. And I must say, they really, really have casted that Numerian captain. Jeez, now I lost his name. Oh yeah, his name is Captain Allendale. And if I remember, he is also he was one of the ancestors of Aragorn, and I must say they cast him very well, because if you listen to his voice, it is, you could see Aragorn in it, or hear Aragorn in it, and there are a lot of more characters that I really liked, and although like I hear those negative comments of the owl doesn't look like owls and other creature, but I do think if you can watch through it or look through it, I think it's a great storyline, and I am curious if they are going to have a following up season of it, and but also it's just, although it's a start of how everything is gonna work. For example, how and why the elves have made, or how they got those 3 rings. And I must say the finale ending with just the singing of the words that Galadriel will speak in Lord of the Rings for the first time. It's very beautiful, and it is, you're gonna think of, okay, what's gonna happen next? There is so much to write still, and so much to discover. And I think also the whole thing of, there is so much you can still write and show and film. I think that has to be a great vision and a great inspiration for what still can be written and the stories. And I'm not going to say I'm going to write it, but it gives you so much more inspiration. And I think if you can punch through all this and the all famous tropes of fantasy, I think you have a great story there. Not only with how it's written before this all started with Lord of the Rings, but it's more, you get more background details and background stories, and I think that is very important for a big story like Lord of the Rings. I would like to see more about those characters, because they have made and shown us what the backstory is. For example, where Frodo has got his bravery of, or of course what I just said, how did the rings made. And we only see in this first season how the rings are made by the elves. With, and this is a spoiler alert, guys, sorry, but it is Sauron who guided the head elvensmith, Lord Celebrimbor. What was really, how can I say this? It was really suspicious that Sauron, or I really need to say Halbrand, at this point he called Halbrand, but really going to see the start again of Sauron. But I really have been confounded of some of the characters, and I really hope that they going to have the courage to filming more about and writing about more about this, the whole thing we see in season 1, and I hope that they will go on in a way. And I know a lot of you don't like it, but keep an open mind. And I think one way they changed the appearances of the elves, for example, so much is that I think they wanted to do it in a different way, and for maybe to all those things and all those years and decades, how much will they change? And it's I like to give this example. For example, like the Discovery Klingons. They changed the Klingons in season 1 so much that we didn't recognize them from the TOS and the TNG era. Now in the season 2 and the following seasons, they are coming back at TNG Klingons, so they are more recognizable. Well, I think you can see that like with the elves as well. So when in their beginning era, they had short hair, and how older they become, or how more and further in the future, or like 3,000-4,000 years afterwards, that they appearing with long hair. And there's one thing I still like to say about the Elven King. I didn't like him. It was really like, and he reminds me a little bit of Liam Neeson, but it's an other different actor. You know, I didn't like him. It was like that he was scared or just want to flee. And that is not what I know or what we know from the elves. Well, like I said, there are some of the characters I really enjoy and really like, and it really gave me inspiration to write some fan fictions, or like some kind of a poem fan fictions that I always call them. And you know, I was very impressed what they did with the surroundings and the symbolism in it, and the different kind of species. But also like when they go to Numrodor, it was very beautiful, and I was in one way expecting those two large statues when you come in Numrodor, and but this was very different, and well, I have enjoyed it. So give it another chance, or give it a chance, and don't write or read and listen to all the reviews people are making, but just go ahead with no knowledge. Just go with the flow, have an open mind, and see what you can find of it, or you can enjoy it or not. And who knows? So this is my little bit of review of the new Lord of the Rings series, and let me check on IMDb what the rating is, because I'm a little curious about it now. Okay, the rating is 6.9, and well, that is higher than I was expected. My rating is a little bit higher. I think it will be, for me, it will be between an 8 and an 8.5, because I really enjoyed it. Of course, they can make things better. So, we will see, hopefully, in the next season. Dear listeners, thank you for listening, and join me next time for a new episode of Orlando Talks. The next episode is about Ghostbusters. You can listen, subscribe, and comment to Orlando Talks on the YouTube channel or join the Facebook group. I also like to tell you about my other podcast called Girls Talking Track. Girls Talking Track is a podcast hosted by two female trackers who will recap every 2 weeks an episode of Star Trek, starting with TNG. All the episodes will be recapping chronically following. Ghost Talking Trek is also to listen, follow and subscribe on Anchor, Google Podcast, Spotify, Amazon Music, or on your favorite podcast app. We also have a Facebook group and a YouTube channel. Every 10th episode will be a video episode so you guys can see us when we talk about the episode. If you'd like to comment on this episode or talk with us about the Star Trek episode we just recapped, you can reach out on the Facebook group or the YouTube channel. I also have a new YouTube channel called #LittleDutchie. On this channel I will react on typical UK things and will explain typical Dutch things. So join, subscribe and like the channel to have some fun and get some more knowledge of my Dutch and Indonesian heritage. I will see you in 2 weeks.